everybody. Welcome to Tea with Mo, lectures on non-duality. I want to talk tonight about a thing called simulation theory. Okay, it suggests that this experience that we're having is a simulation, it's a construct, it's a programming. As much as it's a theory, it's interesting because I had an experience yesterday. I was doing some breath work, went into a breath hold, and then into a, to notice the arisings. And it took me to this simulation theory. So I was lying there, in breath hold, lying there, released, and there was this sense that although I knew I had a body, and although I knew that I was lying down, there was no sense of the body. And there was a sense of, maybe even what you could describe as maybe a disassociation. So you're not actually, and yet it was a dissociative experience, and yet there was the awareness of being connected and tethered to something as well. So while I'm in this state, I'm noticing that I'm not looking into the third eye, but my third eye is open and I'm seeing from it. So wherever I'm looking is beyond this time and space. So I've moved through the portal of the third eye and come out the other side, and I am it. And so, in a sense, a little bit like, say, remote viewing. You're in a space and you are there, seeing it through the third eye. And so it's really interesting because sometimes I'm sitting back looking into the third eye and I can see what's being shown on the screen on the other side of it. I am there. And I was aware of it. And I went, wow, this is really interesting. I can now move with this awareness. And where the awareness then took me was that this experience that it was showing me where this human vehicle that we have, the human experience, the one that has personas, multiple personalities, and is given a name and is identifies with particular personalities and roles and concepts. This human experience, this was in a sense an avatar like in a video game, like in a virtual reality. And that we weren't actually the avatars. I wasn't Maurice, I wasn't Mo. Because I'm having this experience that I'm not the body. And so I'm not the body and I'm also not the mind. I'm something else, elsewhere in a sense of space. So I then had this experience then where it took me to that all of our experiences, and I'm saying all of them because I'm suggesting that there is more than just me in my reality. So all of your experiences are singular in nature. And being singular in nature, what that suggests is that you're having your own experience. I've got no idea what Damien's experience is now. I've got no idea what Gary's or Ali's or even Alex's experience is. So you're all having your own singular experience. And in that singular experience, that there is, even though there's a group of people here tonight, and whether you are all part of my simulation or I'm part of your simulation, and everyone else in this room are mere actors for this segment of time. And each one of the people in this room represents something that exists within the singular experience. So, we offer internal family systems, and we also speak about constellations. So no wonder there's this internal family system of parts that's actually projected in. So if this was my singular experience, that Gary would represent somebody to me, because it exists within me. Carl Jung said that you cannot see anything outside of yourself. So whatever Gary represents for me is what I'm resonating with because it exists within me. And Ali and Alex and Vesna my beautiful Paco. Everyone in this room represents something to me. So in actual fact, the simulation is just going, hey, here's another avatar that we're going to place upon your field of awareness for this period of time that you call a segment of time, so you can then meet and interact with that. So ultimately, this is my singular experience that I'm having as I look at all of you, and I can recognize the parts of me within me because of the recognition of you. So I'm having this own singular experience. Now, this could all actually be just a construct of something greater, like a virtual reality, like a video game, in a sense. The challenge is that while it sits as a singular experience, it's quite isolative. It's not connecting with anything. It's not, it suggests, well, how could this be part of the whole when it's only very singular? And we can then step back into a non-dual perspective and go, actually, if all of this is part of one big simulation that's created by one thing, isn't that one thing having its own singular experience? And yet, it's having its own singular experience through multitudes of experiences, multitudes of units of consciousness that could be a part of it. Now, this can be quite mind-bending, and try not to get your head around it, because it will potentially put you in twists and turns that you may not be able to come back out of. It's just something to consider. And while we consider it, then I want to also give you the dual applications of this knowledge, of this perspective, of this, once again, possibility, because these are all possibilities. Everything's a possibility. Notice what resonates with you, notice what challenges you, and notice what you also want to push away, because that is going to be part of your singular experience. So, point one is that, and something to consider, are you all part of my simulation? Do any of you actually exist? Or am I just talking to parts of myself for this period of time? And even after this period of time, there'll be another group of people. You might be some of that group of people, and I'll just get to meet other parts of myself. And then I do that for the rest of my life until I then finish. It's sort of like, it takes me back to the Matrix movie, where all of the human beings are held in the cells, and they're in these cells hooked up to the Matrix, in a sense, the system, having their own singular virtual reality experience. Yep. So, are you all part of my simulation, or are we a part of your simulation?
Both.
Beautiful. And thank you, Gary, because there can be both. Now, the interesting thing is that for there to be both, there needs to be either or. So is it this or is it this? And then when you go, well, if we put both together, then what we have is this beautiful encapsulation of poles, the duality, and everything that sits within that. So we could all be having our own singular experience. Everyone else around us are actors representing and playing something for us because they resonate with something within us. And that is happening for every one of us all at the same time. Now, when you start to bring that together all at the same time, all happening at once, that sort of creates an algorithm that is quite infinite in capacity and possibility, because that would then suggest that we have close to 8 billion people on this planet, that there's these experiences that are happening which are all perfectly aligned for all 8 billion people on the planet, all happening at this one time. Or is it also then just something that's happening for you in a local perspective? Which then creates this concept or this thought then that, you know, as far as my attention goes is as far as the constellation then appears. And what I mean by that is if my attention is placed upon current events overseas, then I might see more actors playing out a part within my own singular experience. And then I might associate particular roles to those actors. Now those roles are resonant within us because remember, Carl Jung said you cannot see anything outside of yourself. So as we're pushing away people and we're pulling people towards us, these are all representative of this internal family system that we push away and we pull towards as well. So notice this microcosm and the macrocosm. Now we've got duality going into non-duality. Now, just to throw another spanner in the works, let's consider this from a non-dual lens where if we are all having our own singular experience while coexisting with other people having their own singular experience, and we are a part of their experience because we play particular roles because something in us resonates with something in them, and that's happening all around the world all at the one time, could that also be happening beyond this world, beyond this dimension? Why not? Exactly. Thank you, Gary. I love your field of possibility. And this is where non-dual then can take us to. So then the non-dual lens would then suggest that, okay, potentially that this vehicle, this thing called Maurice, is just a fractal. And we spoke about this last session around the Oversoul. The Oversoul having all of these fractals of itself experiencing its own singular experience throughout time and space and time, multi-dimensions and multi-densities of existence that we could call the universe. Now, from channelings of particular entities, there's a really beautiful one on Gaia. I will find it for you. It's really worth listening to. And one of the guys was actually channeling the mantis. And mantis are beings that pretty much reside in the 12th dimension. So they're on fire, okay? So they've gone through all of the densities, all the dimensions. They're interweaving into time and space. Now, what he was saying is that the mantis energy that he was tapping into was actually another fractal of what he was. So here he is channeling his own, in a sense, future self, because that future self had moved through many, many lifetimes, moved through many, many evolutions of spirit. And also, if we're looking from the law of one, if we're looking at that oneness, we're all returning back to the Godhead. We're returning back to Source. And this is part of one of the experiences that will allow us to return to Source. And from this channeling's perspective, it was suggesting that when you get to a point where you actually return to Source, whatever that may look like, you return to nothing. See, there's this singular experience. You return to nothing, and when you return to nothing, because you've gone out and returned, you then get to create your own universe. And as you create your own universe, you create your own simulation. So if you were going to create a universe and you had all of the understandings of leaving Source and returning to Source through this evolutionary process, and you go, hey, good job, go out and create your own. Whoa, what's the framework that I'm going to use to create my own universe? I've got all these blueprints from all of these other universes that have been created. How would I do it? So the question is, are we a part of a simulation that has been created by one singular unit wanting to learn about itself? Who actually made up this universe? Because this universe, in a sense, has its own blueprint. Are we a part of this simulation? Are we a part of what this being has created? Now, consider, contemplate. So you go, that's really great, Maurice. You're really gone out to non-dual. You know, now we've touched a being that's gone out from source, returned to source, come back to singularity, come back to nothing, and then it becomes everything. And so as it becomes everything, then everything that is encompassed in the everything is then coming out from its own source and then returning back. And so this is happening in and this is where the multiverse happens. There's more than just one universe. So maybe more than just one universe, it's all of these, in a sense, evolved beings that have left source, come back to source, and then gone, hey, what am I going to create? Now the beautiful thing here is that as that's happening, maybe out there or in there, I don't know what direction it is, you're also doing it each and every day. You are the creator of your own realities. You are given the resources and the inner resources, the outer resources and the inner resources of the creator. Because you are it. When we look at the internal family systems approach, there's self. Self gets wounded in innocence, very, very young. A part of self is then projected out to be a part of the protecting of the wounding of innocence. You cannot get rid of your parts because those parts are self. It's the reintegration, it's the reharmonizing, it's the remembrance that the part is not separate to the self. Now, this is the human experience, and we love IFS, we love systemic constellations because of the natural flow, the natural cohesion of what is actually happening within our relationships. So as you go through your days, you are creating universes. You are creating constellations. You are the creator of your life. Because we're caught in the 3D matrix density, a lot of our life has been created by the ones who create the conditioning. As we become more awakened and aware of our own spiritual sovereignty, of our own divinity, of our own connectedness to everything, we then start to remember. And as you start to remember, you then start to let go of the old conditionings. And this is the awakening process. This is what is happening now. That's what this fractal agreed to come to speak about. So you could remember. You could remember that you are the creators of your own reality. Because in your minds, you are living virtual realities each and every day. You have so many conversations in your head. So many memories are brought back up. So many memories are created of the future. Each and every one of those sometimes has thoughts and emotions that are attached to them. So see how coming back now to, actually you've got your own singular experience. What is your singular experience? And who is guiding and directing your singular experience? That all comes down to, what are you consuming? Who do you speak to? What are you listening to? What are the conversations that you have? Where are the places that you go? Because that will directly impact the system. And just think of it. So if I've got this system and it's a mixture of thoughts and emotions, sensing, and then I have this light beam that is just shining through me. I'm this projector with all of these filters, and what it does, this is a simulation, it shines it through. So who who is the one who creates these shadows, these lights, these filters, these overlayings? If we can become aware of what's happening within this system, we can then impact what colour this is. And what colour this is then will then shine out into your reality. And as it shines out into your reality, then that is part of your simulation. So let's just get a big brushstroke and go, where the fuck did we just go then, Maurice? All right. We could all be a part of one big simulation that was created by a thing that sometimes we call Source, the Universal God. Because ultimately that's, we're coming to a non-dual space, we're talking about spirituality, I'm connected to this, there's something greater than me, I've got faith in this. Whatever that is that created this, we're living it out because we may not have created it. Now, it's interesting, isn't it? Because when we look at self and parts, a part cannot be a part because it's separate to anything. Like something has to, for us to exist, we must have come from something. For a part to exist, it must have come from self. We're all fractals of something, and we're a part of its experience. And this is, this phrase, you are God realizing itself. You are all God realizing itself. And as you realize itself, you then start to realize your own creative powers because you were born in the form of it. And this human experience is such a special experience. Honestly, it is a really special experience. It's got this thing called a body. It's connected to a nervous system. It's got this mind. It's a beautiful vessel to hold consciousness. And we're given a blueprint of creation. It's called the law of attraction. It's really quite simple.
It is simple, but it's also complicated.
Yes, and I want to acknowledge that.
Because you mentioned on parts, that there is no parts in what you just said there. But when we come into this, when we come out of our mother, we're born very holistic. But then we have emotional events where parts get separated. So can you elaborate a bit more on what you...
Yeah, and look, I think, and this is where language, and I want to make, and should I? I want to preface that the words that I say and what you hear are not necessarily the same, and this is for everybody. So our understanding of parts can be very different. So what I'm saying and what you're hearing can be very different. And even for me to say consciousness, having a human experience, well, what's consciousness? So there's so much lost in translation. Yeah. I'll try to answer that question if I can, because I'm not too sure if I understand where it's coming from as well too. Yeah.
From what I've learned along the way, when we come into the world, as we're growing up, we'll have emotional events happen in our life.
Yes. Yes.
And then parts segregate. The wholeness segregates into parts.
Yes.
So you'll have an original belief of love, pretty much.
Yes.
And then it'll go into a negative belief.
I'm not loved. I'm unworthy. Yes. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So I'm acknowledging that there's parts. I'm not saying that parts don't exist. Yeah? Parts of the human experience. Self is linked to the essence of what we are. Could say it's a spiritual experience. The parts, so self gets wounded because its innocence is young and actually it requires parts to be created. As those parts are created, personalities are born, because each part has its own persona, has its own belief system, its own narrative, its own emotional state, its own behaviour system, and sometimes they'll work on their own value system. So their own individual personalities. Those parts protect us, protect our innocence, and our innocence continues to be wounded because innocence is vulnerable, it's very naive, it's also wondrous and loving and, oh, that's just beautiful, yeah. As innocence continues to be wounded through its naivety, it's also growing and evolving through the information that the parts are providing it. The parts are very wanted and needed because that is part of the human experience. Yeah? And I'd even then suggest to say that part of your soul's agreement was to have those experiences so those parts could be created, so you could then, in a sense, get lost in your persona, so then you could then get to a point where you go, fuck, I'm not this personality, I'm something more, and then using that as the catalyst to then come back and start to look at, well, what am I? That then starts the process of going, hang on, I'm all of these parts that I thought I was. They're continuing to wanting to protect me. However, because they're frozen in time, they're not recognising that you've grown, that you're much more aware now. And then through the parts work, we're then starting to reintegrate and reharmonise. Come home, little one. So I actually think that's what this process is about. Not everyone reharmonises their parts through their experience. Some just don't even recognise that they're self. They think that they are their parts, and that's their experience. And there is God realising itself through its parts experience, not recognising it was connected to something. And then there's others who find a bit of ourselves, and we then start to return and, oh, can I coexist with these parts? Can these parts start to learn to trust that self can lead, and can they then come home? I then start to look at that macrocosm, microcosm of, well, you know, we're individual units of consciousness that go out. Then we ultimately return home to the Godhead. So certainly not a I've got a shitload of parts, Gary, and they're talking to me each and every day. Yeah. And I'm listening. Whereas before I didn't want to listen to them. Or another part of me didn't want to listen to them. So that's all part of the creation. See, it's interesting because this is part of the blueprint, part of the simulation that, well, something greater than ourselves is created, but yet I'm connected to it, because how can I be here if I'm not connected to it? Like, I can't just appear and go, hey, I'm just going to pop into this simulation for this. Well, I'm actually a part of this whole simulation. So all of us, that's where we're all connected. All of us are connected. We all come from the one. That's what non-duality is, you know. Even the ones that we want to vilify, even the ones that we want to destroy, even the ones that create the, because they're a catalyst for us to maybe go, hey, here's some boundaries, and yet, I think there was a phrase that said, hold people at arm's length, but always have them with an open heart. So here's my boundaries, but yet I still see you as another. But that's not on. Sorry. You know. Yeah. So there's this large simulation that's potentially going on, potentially. And then there's this smaller simulation which has its own universe. You create universes each and every day. You are all such powerful magnets, such beautiful energy centers of light, energy centers of love, and you are just all radiating. It's our conditioning that stops us from seeing it. Continues to, maybe, you know, we have that veil of forgetting. That's what this video is about. That's what this conversation is about. And I just want to remind you of your spark. Remind you of your divinity. Remind you that you are God realizing itself. And you are on a journey, as we all are on a journey. and we get to meet other selves, and we also get to meet other selves that resonate something within us, all having their own singular event simultaneously. Simulation theory through the eyes of Mo.